The place, Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. The date, April 12th and 13th, 1861. The occasion, the Civil War begins with the firing on Fort Sumter. 7 states, including South Carolina, had seceded from the U.S. months earlier. Attempts by President James Buchanan to supply U.S. troops at Fort Sumter had failed, and when newly inaugurated President Abraham Lincoln told South Carolina's governor that he too would try to supply U.S. troops at the fort, South Carolina demanded all U.S. troops evacuate Fort Sumter immediately. U.S. troops did not. So, at 4:30 a.m. on April 12th, Lieutenant Henry S. Farley fired a single 10-inch mortar round from Fort Johnson. The shell exploded over Fort Sumter as a signal to open the general bombardment from 43 guns and mortars at Fort Moultrie, Fort Johnson, the Floating Battery, and Cummings Point. Under orders from Confederate Commander Brigadier General P.G.T. Beauregard, the guns fired in a counterclockwise sequence around the harbor, with 2 minutes between each shot. Beauregard wanted to conserve ammunition, which he calculated would last for only 48 hours. Fort Sumter commander Major Robert Anderson held his fire, awaiting daylight. His troops reported for a call at 6 a.m. and then had breakfast. At 7 a.m., Captain Abner Doubleday fired the first shot of retaliation. Given the available manpower and limited supplies, Anderson could not take advantage of all 60 of his guns. He deliberately avoided using guns that were situated in the fort where casualties were most likely. The fort's best cannons were mounted on the uppermost of its 3 tiers, the barbette tier, where his troops were also most exposed to incoming fire from overhead. The fort's central flagpole was knocked down at 1 p.m. on April 13. Colonel Lewis Wigfall, a former U.S. Senator, had been observing the battle and decided this indicated the fort had endured enough. He commandeered a small boat and, waving a white handkerchief from his sword, met with Major Anderson. Knowing he was dangerously low on ammunition and satisfied his troops had defended their post with honor, Anderson agreed to a truce and formally surrendered the fort to Confederate personnel at 2:30 p.m. on the 13th. Major Anderson and his men were allowed to strike their colors, fire a salute, and board a ship bound for New York, with Anderson carrying the Fort Sumter flag with him. The Confederate victory at the Battle of Fort Sumter resulted in enormous support for military action from both the North and South. President Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion, while 4 more states joined the Confederacy, including Virginia. On April 20, Lieutenant Colonel Robert E. Lee resigned from the U.S. Army to take command of all Virginia forces.